Thanks to the ECA for inviting the ACCC along today, and also want to congratulate Rosemary, Lynn, Chris, Sabine, David and the team for putting on a great event. I think it's been excellent, so well done. I sat through the sessions yesterday and I must say what stood out to me was the amount of common ground that we have on a lot of these issues from a lot of people coming at them from different angles, which is must be encouraging for us all, I think. Although there's probably a lot more commonality in what the problems are, I think, than what the solutions are and how we should go about them. The ACCC's inquiry has been mentioned quite a bit, which is also encouraging. It's good to have a focus on our work. And as our chairman, Rod Sims, likes to say, there needs to be a separate focus on affordability. And I think we certainly have that now. Our inquiry's been in two broad parts. From its commencement in March last year to September, we saw our job as identifying what the factors were that have led us to a place of an affordability problem. And I'll talk a bit about that. Since the preliminary report in September, we've been doing a lot more work to understand what is driving and inhibiting competition in the market. And we've got a strong focus on identifying meaningful and practical solutions. So, unfortunately, today won't be a big reveal about about what we've found since the preliminary report for a number of reasons, or what we're going to recommend. We're still working hard at deciding ourselves on what those things will be, so you'll have to wait till July for that. But I wanted to cover three issues. Being what we've found so far, I think it's useful to cover what some of the challenges are in solving these problems, and I'll talk a little bit about where to from here. So in terms of what we've found so far, I won't spend a lot of time on this chart because a lot of you are probably pretty familiar with it. I'll just touch on the key elements. So average household bills across the NEM have increased by 44% between 2007-8 and 2016-17. All of the components of the cost stack have gone up, but the biggest increase has been driven by the network component of the bill. The other sort of notable thing about the stack is that the retail component of the bill at 26% is much higher than you would expect in a competitive market. I'll also add that this chart obviously ends before the worst of the wholesale cost increases took effect. So that will be in our updated numbers that will be published in the middle of this year. And it's also worth saying that the components of the stack have moved differently in different parts of Australia. So this is an average NEM picture that doesn't show a lot of the detail, and the detailed charts for state by state are in the preliminary report. So what are the contributing factors? Concentration. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I'm sure you've all heard most of it before. Exacerbated by large-scale exit. We're investigating the effect of vertical integration. We're looking at the contract market, which is obviously very topical in the context of the National Energy Guarantee. And we're also looking at how changes in the gas market have affected the electricity market. There's been network issues as well, obviously, again, well covered in other contexts, so I won't dwell on them, but it's probably fair to say that the worst of those effects have been in New South Wales and Queensland. We've had costs added to the consumer bill through environmental schemes, and in particular, those that have been associated with premium feed-in tariffs. In the retail space, it's a bit of a longer list that I'll spend a little bit more time on. We're looking very closely at retail costs at the moment. As I said on the chart slide, I think it was 26%. Reflects, we think, a lot about the costs associated with acquiring customers, and we want to look at why that's the case and why competition isn't driving those costs down. There appears to be ineffective competition, I should say. The largest retailers remain pretty dominant, and although there are a lot of signs of competition happening, the benefits of competition don't seem to be flowing through to consumers. Prices are obviously complex not well understood, and the tools available to consumers are not used effectively or not well understood. And some of that hopefully is addressed by the work going on in the AER on EME. Pricing and marketing practices don't make it easy for consumers to make decisions in their best interest. So referring to things there like headline discounting. And one point that's often lost, I think, is that while deregulation has benefited some consumers, it has likely harmed others. There are consumers in both categories, and perhaps we focus too much on one or the other, and what we want is just more in that category that gets the benefits from competition. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the challenges in identifying solutions in this market, because I think we've heard a lot about them in the last 2 days. I'm going to talk about 3, but I've probably heard about 300 more to add to the list. I think the reason I think this needs a special focus is that recognising the challenges is important to identifying what solutions are more likely to work and to avoid those that might be counterproductive. And just as an aside, I mean, we've been reviewing over 150 proposed recommendations submitted to us and to other inquiries by various stakeholders. So I think that stat on its own probably encapsulates what I mean by the divergence in views about how to solve problems, even if we can agree on what the difficulties are. But we're working through that list and considering it all very carefully. So the first issue has been touched on in the last couple of days, and it's consumer heterogeneity, where there's different usage amounts and profiles, obviously, of consumers using electricity. We've got some engaged consumers who are doing very well by shopping around and keeping a close eye on what their electricity spend is. We've seen signs that some consumers are supplied at or below cost, so they're obviously doing quite well out of the current arrangements. My ordering isn't working very well here. Some consumers decide that shopping around isn't worth their while, which is an interesting thing. We have to decide whether we need to do something to help them more, or whether they're just making the decision that it's not in their benefit to shop around and we can leave them alone. But we do have to try and separate those people out from those who would like to get a bit better deal but don't know how, or have tried and have been discouraged. And of course, there's always don't know what happened there. There's also a group of customers who need additional assistance. To that available generally in the market. We're going to get that back. Thanks. So I think the lesson here is that we're going to need different solutions to assist different types of customers. There's going to be no one-size-fits-all solution. The second issue is it's already a highly regulated market. By design, it's very prescriptive and has been amended and added to over time. And some past efforts to regulate to help consumers have often had unintended consequences. And we have seen some signs that they've been circumvented as well. So we need to pay attention to that. The other aspect to this is that regulatory costs are already a significant part of the costs that consumers face. They ultimately do bear those costs. So we do need to be careful about just imposing more rules that will add to those costs. So I think the lesson there is tread carefully. Some of the arm's reach solutions that you might think about in this market may not work or may backfire. And we also have to think about some non-regulatory solutions. So the market is becoming more and not less complex is the third point. Obviously, tariff structures, distributed energy and demand response, which we've heard a lot about in the last couple of days. There's never been more options for consumers in terms of number of retailers, number of offers, the types of offers, and that all adds to complexity. So the lesson here, sometimes we talk about creating a simpler market for consumers. That's not going to be easy of itself, and it's not going to be a silver bullet, even if it can be achieved. There's also, and that's only going to benefit some customers, I think. There's also other customers who are better off if they are given the tools to be able to engage in a complex market and navigate their way through it to get the best outcome for themselves. So where to from here for our inquiry? We're completing our analysis and formulating recommendations that will go to the Treasurer by 30 June. And I just wanted to sort of categorise the types of recommendations we might make, even if I can't be specific about them. And so there's a bit of a list there, but I think the takeaway there is that a lot of what we talk about are sort of regulatory interventions, and I think in reality it's got to be a combination of many different types of things changing here that will lead to the solution, including, I think the last one doesn't get talked about much at all, which is the market sort of self-correcting, and the whole design of the NEM, I think, was set up so that price signals would be sent and that the market would respond to those, and I think we do need to be conscious of that. That's it from me. Thanks.